When you look at a child with ADHD, the first thing that stands out is often not a lack of intelligence or creativity, but rather the difficulty of keeping that creativity contained within the structure that traditional education demands. Teachers may describe these children as restless, distracted, or impulsive, but when you watch them play, something remarkable happens. Their eyes light up, their energy finds direction, and suddenly their attention locks onto the moment. Games, in this sense, are not just entertainment, they are the natural language of children with ADHD. And when we begin to understand this, we unlock a new way of teaching, one that aligns with how their brains are wired, rather than trying to force them into molds that were never designed for them. Edward Hallowell and John Ratey, in their groundbreaking book Driven to Distraction, describe ADHD not as a deficit of attention, but as a disorder of regulation. They write that children with ADHD can focus intensely when something captures their interest, yet they struggle when a task feels repetitive or meaningless. This paradox is often misunderstood by parents and educators who assume that the child chooses not to focus, when in reality, the child's brain is wired to seek stimulation. Games, with their inherent novelty, feedback loops, and sense of progress, naturally provide that stimulation, offering a bridge between the child's restless energy and the structured world of learning. Think about what happens in a simple game of Simon Says. On the surface, it's a playful activity, but neurologically it's training impulse control, working memory, and focus. Each time the child resists the urge to move, when the leader doesn't say Simon Says, the brain is practicing self-regulation. This is precisely the kind of skill that traditional lectures fail to engage, but games bring out almost effortlessly. The playful brain thrives on challenges that are concrete, immediate, and rewarding. And unlike worksheets or rote memorization, games make learning feel alive. Neuroscience supports this. Studies on dopamine pathways show that children with ADHD have lower baseline levels of dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to motivation and reward. When they engage in play or games, dopamine levels rise, increasing both attention and enjoyment. As Ross Greene points out in The Explosive Child, children do well if they can. The challenge is not a matter of willpower, but of finding the right conditions under which their brain functions best. Games create those conditions by aligning tasks with motivation systems that are already active in the ADHD brain. Imagine a child who struggles endlessly with spelling drills. Now imagine that same child in a classroom where spelling words are hidden around the room like treasures, and each correct discovery earns the team a point in a collective game. Suddenly, the child who never pays attention becomes the most engaged participant, scanning every corner with sharp eyes, eager to be the one who finds the next hidden word. The task hasn't changed, the spelling is the same, but the format has transformed the child's relationship to it. This shift from passive to active learning is at the heart of why games can unlock hidden potential. But it is not just about motivation. Games also create structure. Many children with ADHD crave clear rules and immediate feedback, something often missing in traditional teaching. A board game, for example, has a beginning, middle, and end. There are turns, points, and consequences that are visible and predictable. Within this framework, children feel safe to experiment, fail, and try again without the shame that often accompanies academic struggles. In fact, failure in a game is part of the fun. It means another chance to play, another round to improve. This reframing of failure as opportunity can have profound psychological benefits for children who are used to being labeled as difficult or lazy. What is fascinating is that games also tap into social learning. Children with ADHD often struggle with social cues and cooperation, Yet when they engage in a group game, they practice taking turns, reading expressions, and negotiating rules. Play becomes a rehearsal space for life itself. As Hallowell suggests, the strengths of ADHD, creativity, energy, spontaneity, flourish when they are not suppressed but directed. Games channel those strengths into a form that is both constructive and joyful. Ultimately, to see the playful brain in action is to realize that learning for children with ADHD must look different from the traditional classroom. Games are not a distraction from learning, they are learning. They transform the restless energy into focus, the impulsivity into strategy, and the frustration into motivation. When educators and parents embrace this, they no longer see ADHD as a limitation, but as an invitation to teach differently. The question is not, how do we make this child fit into the game of school, but rather, how do we make school feel like a game this child can win? And perhaps that is the greatest lesson, that the playful brain is not broken, but simply tuned to a different frequency. By aligning learning with play, we don't just help children with ADHD succeed academically. We affirm their identity, nurture their confidence, and reveal the extraordinary potential that was there all along, waiting for the right conditions to shine. If you spend time in a classroom with children who have ADHD, you notice something striking. Their energy rarely runs out. It spills into the room like sunlight, unpredictable and powerful, filling every corner. For a teacher who is unprepared, this energy can feel like chaos. Desks shifting, feet tapping, questions interrupting mid-sentence. Yet, as many psychologists argue, what looks like disorder on the surface often hides a simple truth. Children with ADHD are searching for structure, and games, with their built-in rules, goals, and rhythms, can transform that seemingly uncontrollable energy into focused engagement. The chaos doesn't vanish, it is redirected, reshaped, and given a purpose. Edward Hallowell and John Ratey, in Delivered from Distraction, emphasize that people with ADHD thrive when their environment is both stimulating and organized. Too much freedom without guidance leads to overwhelm. Too much rigidity without stimulation leads to boredom. Structured play balances these two extremes. A well-designed game provides boundaries but leaves room for creativity, which is precisely the balance children with ADHD need to flourish. In other words, the game becomes a container, wide enough for imagination, firm enough to prevent collapse. Consider the example of a game like red light, green light. To an outsider, it's just children running and stopping on command. But psychologically, this game is building self-regulation. The rule is simple. When the leader says red light, you must stop, no matter how much momentum you've gathered. For a child with ADHD, whose impulses often override instructions, this is not merely play, it is training. Each stop is a small victory of control, a rehearsal of focus under stimulating conditions. The beauty lies in the fact that the child isn't aware they are practicing self-control. They are simply playing a game, and the lesson seeps in naturally. Greene, in The Explosive Child, makes a critical point. Children do not fail to follow rules because they don't care, but because they lack the skills required to succeed in the moment. Structured play addresses this by embedding skill building into enjoyable activity. A board game, for example, teaches patience as children wait their turn. A cooperative team challenge encourages problem solving and negotiation. Every round of play becomes a small step in mastering executive functions, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibitory control that often lag in ADHD development. One of the most fascinating findings from psychology is that structure does not suppress creativity in ADHD children. It enhances it. Without structure, their creativity may scatter, leaping from one idea to the next without closure. Within a structured game, however, creativity is forced into focus. Take building games like Lego challenges. A child is tasked with building something specific under a time limit. At first, the time limit feels constraining, but soon it provides the focus needed to complete a project. Instead of abandoning halfway through, the child pushes forward, motivated by the rules of the game. The chaos of scattered ideas crystallizes into a finished product. Teachers who incorporate structured play into lessons often report dramatic differences. For example, a spelling bee is not simply about memorizing words, it's about performing under pressure, listening carefully, and responding within the rules. A math relay race turns endless calculations into bursts of excitement, where focus is rewarded not with grades alone, but with the thrill of participation. The structure of the game provides the guardrails, and the play provides the drive. The two together transform the atmosphere from frustration to engagement. What makes structured play particularly powerful is its ability to reframe failure. In academics, failure often feels final: a bad grade, a disapproving comment, a red mark on paper. In games, failure is temporary, even fun. You miss a turn, you lose a round, but the game continues. This creates resilience, teaching children that mistakes are not dead ends, but part of the process. As Hallowell notes, children with ADHD are especially vulnerable to internalizing failure, often labeling themselves as bad or stupid. Games disrupt this cycle by making setbacks safe, repeatable, and recoverable. Another dimension is the social structure games naturally enforce. Children with ADHD frequently struggle with peer relationships because of impulsivity or missed social cues. Games offer a structured rehearsal space for these interactions. Rules dictate when to speak, when to act, and how to respond, reducing the unpredictability that often leads to conflict. A simple card game can teach turn-taking, eye contact, and even empathy as children react to wins and losses together. Structured play, then, is not only a cognitive tool, but a social bridge. Parents often discover this intuitively at home. A child who resists homework may happily engage in a trivia game where the same knowledge is tested in a playful format. The difference lies not in the content, but in the structure. When information is wrapped in a game, the child perceives it not as a demand, but as an opportunity. What seemed impossible in the rigid frame of school becomes achievable in the flexible frame of play. Ultimately, turning chaos into focus is not about erasing the energy of ADHD. It is about giving it shape. Structured play respects the child's need for movement, stimulation, and novelty while teaching the skills necessary for focus and persistence. It does not deny their nature, but collaborates with it, channeling restlessness into rhythm and distraction into attention. To call it play is accurate, but to call it trivial would be a mistake. For the child with ADHD, structured play is education disguised as joy, order hidden in chaos, and focus born out of freedom. If there is one word that often defines the experience of a child with ADHD in school, it is frustration. Imagine sitting at a desk, expected to copy lines of text, solve endless arithmetic problems, or listen silently for long stretches of time while your mind races with ideas and your body pulses with energy. Each failed attempt to comply is met with correction, scolding, or worse, a sense of personal inadequacy. Over time, frustration turns into disengagement. The child begins to believe they cannot succeed, and so they stop trying. But what if the very same child, when placed in a different context, suddenly thrives? This is where games reveal their transformative power. Games replace the weight of frustration with the spark of motivation, largely through the strategic use of rewards. Edward Hallowell and John Ratey, in Driven to Distraction, highlight that motivation in ADHD is not governed by the same linear logic as in neurotypical children. Rather than being driven by long-term goals like study now to succeed later, Children with ADHD respond best to immediate, meaningful feedback. They crave the stimulation of knowing they have achieved something tangible in the moment. This is why games, with their clear systems of points, tokens, levels, and victories, resonate so deeply. Each small win provides instant gratification, which fuels the drive to continue. Take a board game as an example. Each roll of the dice, each move across the board, provides a moment of progress. Even if the final goal is far away, the child experiences constant reinforcement along the journey. In contrast, traditional learning often withholds reinforcement until the very end. The grade on a test, the teacher's evaluation, the final report card. By then, the ADHD child's attention has long since drifted. Games, however, break goals into bite-sized achievements, each one releasing a small burst of dopamine in the brain, building momentum rather than draining it. Greene, in The Explosive Child, reminds us that children act out not because they want to frustrate adults, but because they lack the skills to cope with demands that feel overwhelming. When you embed rewards into games, you essentially lower the threshold for success. The child who once dreaded spelling words may suddenly look forward to earning stars for each correctly spelled word in a playful competition. The stars themselves are not the point. It is the recognition of progress, the tangible proof that effort leads to reward. Motivation replaces frustration because the child finally feels capable. One fascinating aspect of rewards in games is that they are not always material. Sometimes the reward is as simple as recognition, applause, laughter, or being declared the winner. For a child with ADHD who may be more accustomed to hearing criticism than praise, this shift in feedback can be life-changing. Positive reinforcement builds self-esteem and creates a feedback loop of effort and reward. Over time, the child internalizes this process, learning that persistence and focus bring results. Games, then, are not merely distractions, but training grounds for resilience and confidence. Critics sometimes worry that rewarding children constantly risks creating dependency, but research in psychology suggests otherwise when it comes to ADHD. Rewards in games are not bribes. They are structured motivators that gradually help the child bridge the gap between effort and outcome. Over time, intrinsic motivation can grow, but only if the child first experiences the taste of success. Without that, learning remains associated with failure and shame. As Hallowell notes, ADHD is not a disorder of knowing what to do, but of doing what one knows. Rewards provide the extra push that allows action to align with ability. Consider digital games, which often use sophisticated reward systems. A child may play for hours, not because the task itself is easy, but because progress is visible, immediate, and tied to clear rewards. Educational software that adapts these mechanics, badges for mastering concepts, levels that unlock with practice, feedback that arrives instantly, can harness the same motivational power for learning. The key is not the technology itself, but the psychology behind it. The brain stays engaged when rewards are consistent and meaningful. Even simple classroom adaptations can have a dramatic effect. Teachers who transform lessons into challenges with immediate rewards often see children with ADHD flourish. A math problem becomes part of a race, with each correct answer moving a team forward on a scoreboard. Reading comprehension becomes a quest, with points earned for each correct response. The content has not changed, but the context has transformed frustration into motivation. The child is no longer avoiding the task. They are leaning into it with excitement. Perhaps the most profound effect of rewards in games is the way they alter identity. A child who has been told they are lazy or difficult begins to see themselves differently when they succeed in games. They are not the child who cannot focus. They are the child who wins, the one who contributes, the one who shines when the structure is right. This reframing does not just motivate in the moment, it changes the narrative of who they are and what they can become. In the end, the lesson is simple but powerful. Rewards are not gimmicks. For children with ADHD, they are lifelines. They take the heavy burden of frustration and replace it with the light of motivation. They remind the child that effort is worth it, that success is possible, and that learning can be joyful. When frustration fades and motivation takes its place, the child does not just learn better, they live better, discovering in themselves the capacity to grow, to achieve, and to thrive. If you watch a child with ADHD trying to sit still for long stretches, you will quickly see the strain in their body. Their legs bounce, their fingers tap, their eyes wander around the room, searching for stimulation. Traditional classrooms often interpret this movement as misbehavior, demanding quiet and stillness. But neuroscience tells a different story. For children with ADHD, movement is not a distraction from learning. It is an essential part of it. Physical play, far from pulling focus away, actually sharpens attention, enhances memory, and strengthens the executive functions that these children often struggle with. When we harness movement through games, we discover one of the most powerful tools for helping ADHD minds thrive. In Delivered from Distraction, Edward Hallowell and John Ratey emphasize that ADHD is not simply a problem of inattention, but of regulation of focus, impulses, and even energy. The child who cannot sit still is not resisting learning. They are showing us how their body seeks balance. Physical games provide a natural outlet for this energy, creating a bridge between body and mind. Instead of fighting against restlessness, games use it as fuel, transforming excess energy into engagement and focus. Think of a classic game like Duck, Duck, Goose. On the surface, it is playful chaos. Children sitting in a circle, one child running, laughter erupting as someone gets chased. But beneath the surface, cognitive training is happening. Children are practicing anticipation, attention, and rapid decision-making. They must stay alert, ready to jump at the right moment, remembering rules and responding with speed. The movement keeps their bodies engaged, while the structure keeps their minds focused. It is a perfect illustration of how physical play strengthens both attention and memory. Scientific research supports this connection. Studies in developmental psychology have shown that physical activity increases blood flow to the brain, improving memory consolidation and cognitive flexibility. For children with ADHD, whose prefrontal cortex often shows differences in activity, this boost is especially valuable. Greene's The Explosive Child reminds us that children do well if they can, and often what holds them back are lagging skills. Movement-based games develop these lagging skills in a natural, joyful way. For example, a simple relay race that requires remembering and repeating sequences is not just exercise, it is training working memory in motion. One of the most compelling demonstrations of the power of movement comes from kinesthetic learning techniques. Some educators have discovered that teaching multiplication tables through jumping, clapping, or marching rhythms helps ADHD children retain information far more effectively than sitting at a desk with a worksheet. The rhythm anchors the memory, while the movement sustains focus. What once seemed like a restless body sabotaging learning now becomes the very mechanism through which learning takes place. Consider also games that combine movement with strategy, such as Capture the Flag. This outdoor activity requires planning, teamwork, spatial awareness, and constant physical motion. For children with ADHD, the fast-paced environment keeps boredom at bay, while the need to remember rules and anticipate opponents strengthens executive functions. The excitement of running, chasing, and dodging provides a rush of dopamine, fueling motivation and embedding the learning experience deeper in memory. Unlike a traditional lesson, the game is memorable not because it was forced, but because it was fun. The benefits extend beyond academics. Physical play also supports emotional regulation. ADHD children often struggle with frustration tolerance, experiencing sudden bursts of anger or discouragement. In physical games, emotions rise and fall quickly, but the structure of play teaches resilience. Losing a round of tag is disappointing, but the game continues. You get another chance. This cycle of effort, setback and retry builds the capacity to regulate emotions in real-life situations. The child learns that failure is not permanent, that energy can be channeled, and that persistence brings results. It is also important to note the social dimension of physical play. Many ADHD children find social interactions challenging, misreading cues or interrupting peers. Physical games offer a structured environment where social rules are clear: when to run, when to stop, when to cheer, when to wait. These patterns create opportunities to practice turn-taking, cooperation, and empathy. A child who struggles with group work in class may shine in a cooperative physical game, discovering new confidence and acceptance among peers. Teachers who incorporate movement into daily learning often witness remarkable changes. A short brain break with jumping jacks or a quick rhythm game can reset attention, allowing ADHD students to return to academic tasks with sharper focus. The key is not to suppress movement, but to schedule it, channel it, and make it purposeful. Physical games do not distract from learning. They prepare the brain to learn more effectively. Perhaps the most powerful takeaway is this: for children with ADHD, the body and the mind cannot be separated in education. Demanding stillness ignores their natural wiring and sets them up for frustration. Embracing movement through games aligns with their strengths, using what once seemed like chaos to unlock focus and memory. As Hallowell has often said, ADHD is not simply a disorder, but a different way of being in the world. Physical play honors that difference, turning restless energy into one of the greatest assets a child can bring to learning. In the end, movement matters not only because it improves attention and memory, but because it validates who these children are. It tells them, you don't need to sit still to succeed. You can move, you can play, and you can still learn. That message may be the greatest gift we can offer, a shift from shame to empowerment, from restlessness to rhythm, from chaos to clarity. For many parents and teachers, the sight of a child with ADHD absorbed in a video game is both astonishing and frustrating. How is it that the same child who cannot focus on homework for 5 minutes can spend hours mastering a digital world, remembering complex rules, and strategizing moves? The answer lies in the design of games themselves. Video games provide the novelty, feedback, and reward systems that the ADHD brain craves. And when used with intention, they can become powerful tools for learning rather than enemies of attention. The challenge is not to banish technology, but to harness it wisely, turning digital play into meaningful growth. Edward Hallowell and John Ratey in Driven to Distraction emphasize that ADHD is not about a lack of attention, but about difficulty regulating attention. A child with ADHD can enter what they call hyperfocus when something deeply engages them. Video games, with their fast pace and constant feedback, create exactly those conditions. Every level completed, every score achieved, every new challenge unlocked provides immediate reinforcement, releasing dopamine that keeps motivation alive. For the ADHD brain, which often struggles with delayed gratification, this immediate feedback is irresistible. But rather than seeing this as a weakness, we can recognize it as a strength, an indication of how learning environments can be shaped to better fit their needs. The danger, of course, lies in overstimulation. Ross Greene's The Explosive Child reminds us that children who become overwhelmed easily may struggle to regulate themselves when stimulation is constant. Some video games, especially those designed purely for entertainment, exploit this by offering endless novelty without boundaries. For children with ADHD, this can lead to compulsive play, meltdowns when asked to stop, or difficulty transitioning back to real-world tasks. The solution is not to eliminate technology, but to guide it, choosing games that teach, setting clear time limits, and using digital rewards to complement real-world learning. Educational video games are one of the most promising avenues for ADHD learning. Programs that teach math, reading, or problem-solving through game mechanics tap into the very systems that hold children's attention. For example, a child who dreads multiplication tables may happily engage in a game where solving equations allows their character to advance through an adventure. The act of solving is no longer a chore. It is a key to progress. The brain experiences the thrill of achievement, anchoring the lesson in memory far more effectively than a worksheet ever could. Another strength of digital learning is adaptability. Unlike traditional classrooms, where every child is expected to keep pace with the group, many educational games adjust difficulty based on performance. This individualized feedback is crucial for ADHD learners who may excel in some areas while struggling in others. The game never makes them feel left behind. It simply offers the next challenge at their level. In doing so, it creates a sense of competence, something children with ADHD often lack after repeated experiences of failure in conventional settings. Technology also offers unique opportunities for building executive function skills. Strategy games, for instance, require planning, prioritizing, and anticipating outcomes, all areas where ADHD children need support. Even games that appear purely recreational often involve managing resources, delaying gratification, and problem-solving under pressure. When guided correctly, these experiences can translate into real-world skills. A child who learns to plan ahead in a digital quest may begin to see the value of planning in daily life. Parents and teachers, however, must remain intentional. Without structure, digital worlds can become escapes rather than tools. Clear rules around screen time, regular breaks, and discussions about the content of games are essential. Some families adopt reward systems where screen time is earned through other responsibilities, reinforcing the idea that digital play is part of a balanced routine rather than an uncontrolled indulgence. This balance mirrors the structure provided in non-digital games, ensuring that technology serves learning rather than undermines it. It is also important to recognize the social dimension of digital play. Online games often involve teamwork, communication, and cooperation, skills that ADHD children may find difficult in face-to-face settings. For some, these virtual interactions provide a safer space to practice social skills, building confidence that can later transfer to real-world relationships. However, guidance is necessary to ensure these experiences remain positive and do not expose the child to harmful environments. What makes digital worlds so powerful for ADHD children is their ability to transform attention from scattered to sustained. A child who once resisted reading may suddenly be motivated to read instructions in a game. A child who avoids math may embrace it when it becomes a tool for progress. A child who feels isolated may find connection through cooperative play. When technology is chosen carefully and used with boundaries, it does not distract from learning, it becomes learning. In the end, the goal is not to demonize video games or to glorify them uncritically. It is to recognize the unique relationship ADHD children have with digital stimulation and to guide that relationship with wisdom. As Hallowell has often said, ADHD is not about a deficit of ability, but about finding the right environment. Digital worlds, when designed with purpose, can be such an environment, structured, rewarding, and endlessly engaging. The challenge for parents and educators is to direct this engagement toward growth, ensuring that every level gained in a game is also a step toward greater focus, memory, and confidence in life. When used wisely, video games and digital tools become not the enemy of learning, but one of its most powerful allies. For the ADHD child, they can transform frustration into mastery, loneliness into connection, and distraction into focus. The digital world does not replace reality. It prepares the child to navigate it with new skills, new confidence, and a renewed belief in their own potential. When we talk about children with ADHD, the gap between theory and daily reality is often wide. It is one thing to understand that games can unlock focus and motivation, but quite another to translate that into routines at home or strategies in the classroom. Parents face the challenge of managing homework battles, while teachers juggle crowded classrooms where one child's energy can set the entire group in motion. The question becomes, how do we bring the principles of game-based learning into real life in ways that are simple, effective, and sustainable? The good news is that the answer lies not in complicated systems, but in practical techniques that anyone can apply. Edward Hallowell and John Ratey, in Driven to Distraction, stress the importance of building environments that affirm strengths rather than magnify weaknesses. For children with ADHD, this means shifting from correction to connection, from punishment to motivation. Games do this naturally because they frame challenges as opportunities and mistakes as steps along the way. By bringing game-based methods into daily routines, parents and teachers create spaces where children feel empowered to succeed rather than doomed to fail. At home, one of the simplest techniques is turning chores into games. A child who resists cleaning their room may engage eagerly if the task is framed as a race against a timer or a scavenger hunt for hidden items. Instead of saying, "Pick up your toys," a parent can say, "Let's see how many toys you can rescue from the floor before the buzzer goes off." The structure is the same. Cleaning happens, but the format transforms reluctance into enthusiasm. The timer provides a sense of urgency, the counting provides feedback, and the accomplishment provides satisfaction. What once triggered conflict becomes a source of laughter and success. Homework, too, can be gamified. For children who struggle to sustain focus, breaking assignments into short rounds of effort with small rewards in between can be effective. 10 minutes of concentrated work might earn a point, and after a certain number of points, the child can choose a privilege, whether it is screen time, a favorite snack, or extra play outside. The goal is not to bribe, but to create a structure where effort is acknowledged and rewarded consistently. Over time, the child begins to internalize the connection between focus and achievement. Teachers can apply similar methods in the classroom. Ross Greene's insight in The Explosive Child, that children do well if they can, reminds us that discipline alone does not teach skills. Instead, games can build lagging skills in a supportive way. A teacher might transform a math lesson into a team challenge where solving problems correctly allows the group to advance a token on the board. Reading comprehension could be taught through role-playing games, where students embody characters and solve challenges within a story. The lesson remains the same, but the context changes, shifting from passive reception to active participation. Movement-based games are especially valuable in school settings. Many teachers already incorporate brain breaks, but for ADHD students, these breaks can be integrated into the lesson itself. Spelling words might be jumped out with skipping ropes, or historical dates could be matched with movements in a relay race. By combining academics with physical activity, teachers align with the ADHD brain's natural need for movement, keeping attention sharp and memory strong. Digital tools, when used wisely, also have a place in both homes and classrooms. Educational apps with built-in reward systems can reinforce lessons, especially when parents or teachers guide their use and connect digital achievements to real-world praise. For example, a child who earns badges in a reading app might share their progress with the class or with family at dinner, turning solitary play into shared celebration. The digital game becomes not a distraction, but a bridge to connection. One of the most powerful but often overlooked techniques is using cooperative games rather than purely competitive ones. Many children with ADHD already struggle with self-esteem, and constant competition can increase frustration. Cooperative games, where the group wins or loses together, shift the focus from individual failure to collective problem-solving. Board games that require teamwork, or classroom challenges where points are earned as a group, foster empathy, patience, and shared responsibility. These are not just academic skills, but life skills that strengthen relationships and resilience. Parents and teachers must also remember the importance of consistency. A game-based approach works best when it is predictable and reliable. If rewards are offered one day but forgotten the next, the system loses its power. Clear rules, consistent feedback, and a sense of fairness make the game trustworthy, allowing children to relax into the structure. As Hallowell often emphasizes, predictability creates security, and security creates the conditions for growth. Perhaps the most crucial takeaway is that game-based techniques are not tricks to manipulate children, but strategies to meet them where they are. They honor the ADHD brain's need for stimulation, feedback, and novelty, while also teaching the skills necessary for focus, persistence, and cooperation. In doing so, they change the dynamic between adult and child. Instead of being adversaries locked in conflict, parent and teacher become allies in play, guiding the child towards success through joy rather than struggle. In the end, bringing it home means making play a natural part of learning, not something reserved for recess or weekends. It means seeing every moment, from homework to household tasks, as an opportunity to transform chaos into focus, frustration into motivation, and restlessness into growth. For children with ADHD, this is more than a teaching method. It is a way of life that validates their differences, celebrates their strengths, and equips them with tools to navigate a world that too often misunderstands them. When we turn learning into play, we do not just educate, we empower, giving children not only the skills they need, but the confidence to believe they can succeed. If this video opened your eyes to how games can truly transform learning for children with ADHD, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful insights backed by psychology and real-life stories. Share this with a parent, teacher, or friend who needs these strategies today. And remember, every week we bring you new tools to turn challenges into opportunities. Join our community, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep building a world where every child learns through joy.